Welcome to Kevin's Beauty Tips. Today I'll talk about 5 ways to style your hair. Well, this was how I would start my videos back in the days. Imagine it's 2007 and a young kid that you see pictured here is sitting in front of a laptop and is editing some stuff. That was me, and I was editing YouTube videos and putting them out there. Today, YouTube is kind of governed by a lot of rules that are predictable. You have the algorithm, most people know how it works, and it's quite efficient. Let's do a little survey. Who here knows what YouTube is? Great. Who has a YouTube channel? That's like almost nobody. Yeah, great. So today YouTube is kind of one game, but back then in 2007 when I started, YouTube was basically the Wild West of the internet. There was no algorithm recommendations, there was no monetization strategies, there was just one mission: broadcast yourself. And that's exactly what I did.
So, hallo zu FTV. Heute, bevor ich erstmal mit dem Video anfange, ein herzliches Dank an alle meine Abonnenten.
My first videos were far from polished. If you came looking for some kind of content strategy, you would be massively disappointed. I was talking about apps that I reviewed. I was talking about how to get white teeth. I was even talking about how to get a girlfriend, even though I never had one. But very soon I learned my very first lesson on YouTube, and that is, don't be afraid to be inspired by the competition. Back then, beauty YouTubers were all the hype. So I did what my puberty mind was interested at that time. I talked about beauty tips for a man. What happened next? YouTube partner status, sponsorships from multinational corporations, fan letters, and a lot of attention, frankly, for a young teenager. But as fast as it started, it also stopped again. Because I learned my second lesson. I stopped caring about men's beauty tips at some point. So I started talking about other stuff, like entrepreneurship. But when I stopped caring about these topics, my audience stopped caring about me. And so I lost them. Nevertheless, this was not just some brief stint as a beauty guru. This was essentially the beginning of a 15-year journey to where I am at now. And this path didn't look like it's pictured here. It looked a bit more like this. Because sometimes the dreams we chase as children have a funny way of chasing us back, even though we keep running actively away from them, as I did. Because look, for me, I'm from the business domain, and the career path of a typical business high performer, it probably looks something like this. You start at a top-tier school. Probably you start at a top-tier kindergarten. Top-tier school, top-tier university, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. You then go to a great job, consulting, hedge funds, private equity, and then you do some serious, complicated, billion-dollar business. Very professional stuff. So I thought, great, that's probably what we need to do. So I kind of started my way. I went to a great university, lots of internships, consulting, went to China, investments in startups, venture capital. But somehow I felt, this might look great from the outside, but it doesn't really feel like I'm getting closer to where I'm supposed to be. Because I learned my next lesson. Even the top is crowded. Even though I was following that picture-perfect playbook, I was still not getting closer to building this professional, massive, billion-dollar company. In fact, I had no clue how to get there. So maybe, just maybe, it might make sense to follow my true passions. Maybe this might get me closer there. Because sometimes, if we don't get deep into an industry, like me back then, I was not as deep into YouTube. If we don't do that, we don't realize the massive monetization potential it has. Because who would have known that nowadays, we have headlines like this. Kids literally dream about being creators instead of being astronauts. I always wanted to be an astronaut. And, now kids want to be YouTubers, creators, and that comes with a lot of monetization potential. So I was running one YouTube channel back then, and I decided to essentially give it a test. What if I treat this YouTube channel as a business? So what if I take a bunch of money and I dump it onto the YouTube channel? I hire writers, I hire editors, I even hire people to come up with ideas for videos. Surely nobody could replace me, right? Well, next lesson, everyone's replaceable. My video ideas were good, but there were people who had even better video ideas. My script writing was good too, but there were people that had much better skills. And my editing was, frankly, it was okay, but there's lots of people who can do better editing than me. Well, and to my surprise, the videos really started popping off. So I asked myself, if I can do it with one channel, why not try with multiple channels? And so as I stood at this crossroads with my normal career, back then living and working in Shanghai on the one side, and this opportunity to double down on YouTube, which was a big question mark for me at this time, I was trying to come up with a mental framework in order to decide what to do next. And I came up with the worst case, best case framework. Originally, this was a framework designed to help physicians discuss options with frailer old patients and their families to come up with treatment decisions. But you can use it in business all the time. And what you ask yourself is what's happening in the worst case, what's happening in the best case. In the worst case, I lose a bunch of money and I'll probably need to reapply for some normal job at some point. But in the best case, I get a couple of steps closer to building this media empire. And this, right now, might be the perfect time to do it. Because YouTube today, and 2 years back then, when I started out on this journey, looks a lot different than in 2007, 8, 9, when I first started on YouTube. Because one thing you can remember from this talk is, right now is both the worst and the best time to start your journey on YouTube. Because look, back then, YouTube, this is the YouTube page in 2009, was full of mistakes and errors. The algorithm was highly inefficient. There was a lot of clickbait. Well, there was also a lot of amateur videos, so it was easier to stand out, you might say. Today, YouTube looks something like this. You have massive production sets for some creators. You have highly sophisticated production and post-production processes. You have more creators than ever, 64.5 million people competing for your attention. And that shows in the numbers. Just 0.08% of people reach the highly coveted 1 million subscriber status. So you might say, well, that's kind of highly discouraging. But on the other hand, YouTube is more rational than ever. The YouTube algorithm is one of the most sophisticated algorithms across all social media platforms. So if you manage to produce a video that is really great according to YouTube's algorithmic standards, this video will be successful. So the luck component has been has been shrank down to know, like a tiny piece. And if you make it on YouTube, you know, money and fame is yours. You will maybe not get beat down like Logan Paul here, but you'll make a lot of money. You have creators like Mr. Beast, who is supposed to earn somewhere between $500 and $700 million this year, which is crazy. And you will benefit massively from this big reach. But back to my journey. When we started building more and more of those channels, we at some point had a bit of a network of YouTube channels. We started working with television stations, even building channels for them. And we built up a team of around 30 people. And at some point during this journey, I learned another important lesson. Because for the first time in my life, I really had the feeling like I arrived in some industry. And that, to me, who's an absolute workaholic, must be one of the nicest feelings on earth. When you know you found an industry where you can work for the rest of your life. And that's exactly what I felt, and that's a feeling I never had before that. Neither during my consulting days working for different companies, nor during my investor days working with different startups. And when you finally find that one industry that you want to be in for the rest of your life, something really cool happens, because you start naturally connecting with people. I was on phone calls with small creators, big creators, somewhere across the pond, with media executives, investors who are looking at YouTube channels. And when you surround yourself with all of these people, and this comes naturally, you also start seeing where the industry might be heading. And there's the obvious trends, with traditional TV revenue going down and down and down, and streaming revenue is going up and up and up. All of us here, at least statistically, are consuming more and more streaming and less TV. And within the streaming bucket, which one is the biggest platform? Of course not, it's YouTube. And you also have the less obvious trends. Increased M&A activity. There's a lot of venture capital and private equity players looking at the YouTube market. There's big companies looking to acquire YouTube channels or packages of symbiotic YouTube channel networks. With these big players coming into the space, there's increased professionalization. So you see that production processes and post-production processes are looking much more professional nowadays. There's much more capital involved. And obviously, with everything that is going on around the world, we have highly increased usage of AI. AI can cut your production cost in half if you do it right. Now, the question is, where does this leave the ambitious individual looking to double down or even start their YouTube journey today? Well, first of all, make heavy usage of AI. These big legacy media companies are very slow, but there's literally AI tools popping up every single day. So if you make clever use of them, you have a competitive advantage. Next, look at the niches. The riches are in the niches, as they say, and this holds even more true for media companies nowadays. So if you are very passionate about one topic, chances are there's many people who would like to, take part of this passion of yours. Also, niches have high monetization potential, which kind of ties in with the next point, which is diversification. Try to diversify your revenues. The worst feeling is to be dependent on only Google AdSense revenues and sponsorship revenues, because your sponsors are going to be to make sure that your next video is getting a lot of clicks. So it's a very hard space to be in. One thing that I think is going to be very attractive is pairing YouTube channels with micro SaaS applications. Holy grail of making money in the future. And lastly, look for a genuine interaction and also this slight imperfection. So make content interactive and build that genuine audience connection and embrace this imperfection that comes along with being a solo creator at some points in time. Because in a world where content and careers become more and more rigid and more streamlined and professional, sometimes it's best to do the opposite to become successful. Thank you so much.